those next 200 years, the church insisted that you could not serve in the army of Caesar and be a Christian at the same time.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and she shares a very interesting story at the beginning of the pod. And then later on, we sat down with Dianna Butler Bass, who's got a brand new book out, A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. It is an excellent pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
On edge. I know.
Okay.
You know what's coming.
Spill the beans.
We have a live audience of one today.
We do have a live audience. You may hear that echo. She's really our laugh track.
Right. The only problem is our live audience is my little sister. And there's really no one better in this world to heckle you than a little sibling, right?
Absolutely. I advocated for giving her a mic, but you said no. So.
No, that's the thing. She has no microphone. So whatever heckling goes on, hopefully you won't hear it. But here we are. I'm very nervous.
I'm sorry you're on edge.
But I am sort of glad that she's here because of my opening story that I'm going to share.
Oh, can't wait.
So we are off next week. We're not recording a pod, which I don't know who scheduled that, but I'm not sad that we're getting a week off.
You're welcome.
I know. Thank you. However, next week is Halloween week, so we won't have a Halloween episode. So
yeah. Or for all those who are spiritual out there, it is also Reformation Sunday.
Oh, that's right.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Reformation Sunday. Not Reformation Sunday, Reformation Day.
But we do celebrate Reformation Day on Reformation Sunday. So technically.
Okay.
Well, not technically.
Anyways. Okay. So I thought I wanted to open today with a bit of ghost story.
Ooh.
Kind of a ghost story on multiple levels. So this weekend, you got me up earlier than I wanted to get up on the weekend.
Crack at 10 o'clock. I know.
Hey now. Hey now. I don't need heckling from you either. And asked me to go with you to the hardware store to look at, I don't know what it was you were going to look at. I was like, okay, fine. So
did you just say the hardware store?
Well, Lowe's is a
How
hardware
old are
store.
you?
Shut up.
Go ahead.
Like I said, no heckling. So anyways, I'm going to try to tell this as quickly as possible.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
We go and I decide to take a spin through the Halloween section because things are on sale. And I come across the most perfect Halloween decoration.
It is
we
amazing.
had to buy this. So it is the 3 hitchhiking ghosts from the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World.
It is.
Phineas, Ezra, and Gus, if you guys didn't know their name. And for all you Disney haters out there, I apologize. I love this ride. It has been my favorite since I was a little kid. It's such an emotional connection to me. Anyways, so we, of course, had to bring Ezra, Gus, and Phineas home with us.
Of course we did.
And they're big
no
enough,
question about it whatsoever.
yes. So they're big enough that they can go in the front yard. And they have lights and, the song and motion and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So we get them set up. I'm so happy. And put a light on it, everything. So if you would like to see them, go check out our socials. There are videos of Ezra, Phineas, and Gus on our social media. But
Precious.
Hey, we don't have kids living at home anymore, so
we do not.
We got to post videos of something. Anyways, so the next morning, I get up and I notice that Ezra's arm is off out of whack.
Yeah, it was dislocated.
Yeah, his shoulder was dislocated. So I was like, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought them all inside, and then that night I started really looking into, I was going to try to fix it or figure out if it broke or whatever. Well, there was nothing broken on it. And these are all metal parts because it's all moving.
Yeah, it was really strange. You showed it to me.
Yeah, moving pieces. I was like, there's no way the metal's not bent. Nothing's broken. What happened here?
mean, my reasoning or my thought was Cat got involved in the situation.
There's no way
Cat
could have done this.
Yeah,
no, Cat could not have done this. Anyways, so I'm looking, and I finally I take we thought maybe somebody had messed with it, but there's no way anybody,
Right.
because there's clips and fasteners. There would have been some evidence that somebody had
Sure.
been up in the mechanics of it. So I start to try to take off the clips or whatever, and am just so confused. And you looked at me and you said, maybe your mom did it. And the minute you said that, not the arm, but one of the little metal rods
Yeah.
that helped with the movement fell
Fell
off.
off. It was spooky.
And you and I looked at each other, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
crap, you're right. And
Okay.
and here's the thing. This is what it brought to mind. If you'll recall, my mother was a huge practical joker.
Yes.
And she loved nothing more
Mm-hmm.
than to play practical jokes. And I said at her memorial service,
Yes.
the only thing that makes me more nervous than, fearing a practical joke from my mother on this side is fearing what she will do to us now that she's not bound by human limitations.
You did say that.
I did say that. Well, my friend, there is no other explanation. That was so bizarre. And once that metal rod fell,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden the fix revealed itself.
Yeah.
And the contraption had to be switched around.
Right.
I'm telling you, there's no other explanation than something paranormal.
No, absolutely. And for our longtime listeners who probably know this, but for new listeners, your mom and dad lived in the very house that we currently live in right now.
Oh yes, we did. Yeah, you're right. We did buy this house from
Yes.
from my father. Yes,
Yeah.
when he decided to move out of
Yeah.
it. So yes, it was crazy. So I've been marinating on that. And when we were at Lowe's and looking at the Haunted Mansion, of course, part of my connection to that and to
Mhm.
those ghosts is my mom. I
Yeah.
mean, because we, this was something we experienced
Sure.
together as a child and even as adults with our own
Yeah.
kids. So she was in my mind. And my mother also loved any sort of obnoxious animatronic
She did.
toy or animal.
She loved the louder, the better.
Exactly.
The more obnoxious, even better.
I mean, and the tragedy of all this is that she had dementia and she had fallen too far into that to be able to enjoy the modern movement of all these massive animatronics that we now enjoy.
Sure.
Otherwise, she would have
her
had a
house
yard
it would have been
full
crazy.
of them.
Yeah.
So anyways, but then the next day, this is another random story. We were in Boston a few weeks ago for our son's birthday, and I found someone's driver's license and credit card on the streets of
You did?
Boston. This is a
Totally
long story,
random.
which I will tell later because
It's a good story.
it's a good story. But anyways, so I tracked this woman down and mailed her driver's
Stalker.
license back. Well, yeah. Hey, those stalking skills come in handy sometimes.
They do.
So sent her driver's license back, and she mailed back to me a very nice card. And this was
It was very sweet.
it was the next morning I received this after the incident with Ezra, Phineas, and Gus.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent a little, a decorative ornament, and it's a dragonfly, and it says, "Dragonflies are with us for a short time, and angels are with us for a long time."
Oh.
And I was just, I don't know.
Coincidence?
I don't know.
I think not.
I don't know. And so here's the thing. I don't know what actually happened. I'm telling you,
Right.
there's no human explanation for what happened.
Yeah.
And I know it goes against, what we were taught growing up, but it makes me feel good, I guess, in a way, to think that maybe my mom is somewhere cackling. She had such a definitive cackle.
I can hear her laugh right
Oh,
now
I
in my
can
head.
too. whenever she would get you,
Oh, yeah.
she just, that laugh was so distinct, and
Yeah.
I just couldn't, it's audible. I can hear it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, even if she somehow didn't do that, she is so enjoying this moment right
Oh,
now.
100%. 100%.
So anyways, that's
So,
my little ghost story for Halloween.
Well, that's a great story. And it's, for me, I think there's a lot of validity to that and to the notion that our ancestors are always with us. And you've heard me talk about this time and time again in my indigenous ancestry and culture, that a belief from indigenous cultures, in particular Native Americans, is that our ancestors, when they go on their journey in the
Mhm.
afterlife, that they return. And when they return with purpose and with reason, and they're there for support, encouragement,
Jokes.
and jokes as well. And, one of my favorite television shows in the last decade, and I've spoken about this on the pod, has been Reservation Dogs by Sterling Harjo, who's a fellow Muskogee. And it is terrific. And, I don't want to go into the overall story, but there are a couple of scenes where ancestors show up to these teenage kids. And there's one where the grandmother dies in the house, and the granddaughter goes out in the backyard and she's crying. And grandmother shows up, and it's this hysterical moment between the two. And
Right.
your grandma's cracking jokes and stuff about where she's going and stuffing like that, and taking fry bread with her and hominy and stuff like that. And it's a beautiful, humorous moment. But then there's this scene where Willie Jack, one of the characters, is exploring her indigenous spirituality. And her aunt, who's played by Lily Gladstone, who
Mm-hmm.
was in Killers of the Flower Moon, Oscar nominated actress, she playing her aunt, and she's teaching Willie Jack to pray. And Willie Jack is praying in, a very odd way because she's a teenager, but she's calling on her ancestors. And Harjo creates this image that as she's praying, her ancestors begin to show up behind her. And it's first this young relative who died young, and then there's more, and then the elders show up. And as she's praying, she begins to cry. As she's crying, the young woman reaches out and touches Willie Jack's shoulder, and Willie Jack just craters. And it's just this eternal reminder that our ancestors are always with us. And for those of us who grew up Christian, evangelical in particular, I believe we have perverted that belief
Mm-hmm.
because indigenous cultures all around the world, including the Hebrew culture, believe in this afterlife where our ancestors remain with us. And when we talk about eternal life is lived on through legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that with all of my heart. And as a Muskogee, I believe my ancestors are always with us and that they're there supporting us, encouraging us, providing wisdom when we need it, and solace and peace when we need it as well. So, your story about your mom, while it's funny, I think she's here, and
It's
I think she's always with us.
And that and that's not the only experience I've
No.
had with her or with other people who were close to me that I've felt their presence. And I'm just, as I get older and more open-minded to things, it is such a comfort to be able to kind of lean into that. And I can remember vividly as a child, like you said, we were just taught such a perverted view of the afterlife. But I remember asking adults in my life,
Hmm.
well, what about when you go to heaven? Can you not see, your loved ones? And I was told no.
Yeah.
I was like, well, isn't that horrible? And
Hmm.
then I was told, well, you just don't even know. You don't even care when you're in heaven because you're so happy. And I'm like,
Right.
it did not make sense to
No.
me. And so, the older I've gotten, and unfortunately, the older you get, you do lose more people that are close to you. And the more I have felt the presence of them with me, the more it just has brought me such
Yeah.
joy and comfort to have those little moments, to
Yeah.
have those little kind of angel moments that you have in your life. You think, okay, this person is not lost to me. They're still with me. I carry
Yeah.
them with me every day. And even if it's a freaking scary, practical joke, it does. It's comforting.
Yeah.
And
It
we
is.
don't lose that of the people who have been in our lives and the people that we have loved. And someday I look forward to haunting you. So,
I can't wait for those practical jokes.
right?
But again, I don't believe in coincidences. This is an opportunity to share some exciting news because our senior media producer, Cliff Vaughn, is in the middle
Oh,
of
yes.
producing the second season of Good Faith Stories. And the theme of this episode is going to be second comings. Cliff has a great story.
Yes.
I have a great story. And we're going to record another story this weekend on our trip to Arkansas of another colleague of
That's
ours.
right. And this kind of came about from these types of
Yeah,
conversations
absolutely.
that Cliff and that we've had
Mhm.
about those moments where
Yeah.
you do encounter something kind of the unexplained.
Yeah.
But the stories, yes, that are going to be on there are so great. So, yes, that's a great
Yeah.
tie-in. I'm
So
glad you
be
plugged
sure
that.
to keep checking goodfaithmedia.org because it's going to be coming out soon, and the stories are just absolutely incredible. So subscribe. Go to wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to Good Faith Stories because the second season is going to be coming out.
So this week we were able to interview one of your heroes. I know you
Yeah.
were very excited.
Yeah, Dianna Butler Bass has always been a hero of mine. I was introduced to her years ago. She is a church historian, a Christian historian, has done a remarkable job of educating not only me, but the general populace about the real stories within Christianity. And so I've always admired her. She's taught me so much. And so when we got the opportunity to interview her on this podcast, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. I didn't even ask you for permission. I said, yes, we're going to interview her because she's got a brand new book out titled A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. It is a really inspiring book as she works through the Christian calendar. She said in the interview that you'll hear in just a moment that this was really a spiritual exercise that she needed during this
Mhm.
very difficult time in our world.
And I think she brings to light in the interview and in the book just kind of the human construct, which you and I have read some about before, of time
Mhm.
and calendars. And she kind of reframes that in such a way that made so much sense.
Yeah.
Of we have tied our existence to a construct that, like we talked about other things in our culture,
Mhm.
it's just the air that we breathe, the water we swim in. And she does really take you on a journey of stepping back
Yeah.
and looking, at time and space in a different way and really focusing on those. And it was just, yeah, it was an inspiring book, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yep. So Missy and I'll be right back with Dianna Butler Bass to talk about her new book, A Beautiful Year. Hi, I'm Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media. We're a nonprofit dedicated to inclusion for all, freedom for all, and justice for all. And we invite you to support us in this work by becoming a Good Faith Advocate. Everyone who donates $50 or more per year becomes a Good Faith Advocate. You'll get our free quarterly magazine, discounts at our bookstore, access to other exclusive content, and more. You'll also be supporting media content and journalism that makes a difference. Consider becoming a Good Faith Advocate today at goodfaithmedia.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us, Dr. Dianna Butler Bass. One of my heroes is an award-winning author, popular speaker, inspiring preacher, and one of America's most trusted commentators on religion and contemporary spirituality. Dianna's passion is sharing great ideas to change lives and the world, a passion that ranges from informing the public about spiritual trends, challenging conventional narratives about religious practices, entering the fray of social media with spiritual wisdom and smart theology, and writing books to help readers see themselves, their place in history, and God differently. Her latest book is A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. Dianna, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thanks, Mitch and Missy, both for having me here.
So, Dianna, congratulations on the book. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But before we do, I want to kind of set us up a little bit in talking about just the state of things as they are right now.
Start off on a positive
That's
note.
right. We're going to start out on an uplifting note. But I just wanted to, I know last time Mitch saw you was, during the lead up to the presidential election, and you were with Robert Jones and Jamar Tisby and Kristen Dumais. You were all warning folks about the dangers of Christian nationalism and the draconian policies of Project 2025. Unfortunately, not enough folks heeded the warnings of you and many others. So here we are, 10 months into a second Trump presidency. So I know we've all kind of been playing armchair quarterback these last 10 months, but what are some of your takeaways as to how we got to this moment and what we do from here?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Uh-huh.
Mostly because we did spend
Mhm.
a lot of time
Mhm.
telling people what could happen. And it was very depressing that we felt as if people just shrugged it off.
Mhm.
And so that's a really tough part of my life right now, is getting past the fact, and it wasn't just a few months before the election. My work has been pointing in the direction of the authoritarian collapse of evangelicalism for a long time. And I had also been pointing out the problems that were just obviously a part of the main line too. And those problems were institutional and theological and wrapped up in social vision and also fear, the fear of the white folks who are the main sort of membership of
Mhm.
both of those groups. And I was trying in particular to get the people in my communities in white churches over the fear and to see realistically what might be going on around them politically. And some people listened, lots and lots of people didn't. And that's pretty depressing to have to live with that reality. Um, Mostly because it's worse
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
than what even Chicken Little like me was the
Uh-huh.
Right.
was warning
Right.
about
Yeah.
in advance.
So, Diana, you are a historian. I've admired you for years. Your work just is incredible. You have influenced me and influencing me, the congregations that I led when I was in parish ministry. Heard many quotes from the pulpit from your work. So, as a historian, I mean, let's put this into context because this feels like one of those hinge moments in history because of what we are witnessing with our eyes. Because you hear a lot of, especially some of our conservative colleagues say, we've been through this before. It's a pendulum swing back and forth between progressivism and conservatism. But this seems a lot different. So, as a historian, is this different?
There are pendulum swings, and one of the kind of quiet pieces of history that I've worked on for a long time, I first noticed it in graduate school, was how American religion impacted political issues.
Mhm.
And first of all, it would do it in a highly democratic direction, bringing in lots more people, widening the table of both church and democracy. And then people would sort of freak out a little
Mhm.
bit. And what would happen next is that there would be movements towards orderliness. And so you had this swing between openness and order, openness and order. Now, sometimes those swings were modest and mostly located in churches. You would get, when you had sort of radical evangelicalism, you would get an interest in liturgy and maybe the more romantic parts of church life, in terms of looking more Catholic and being concerned about the clerics and other things that indicated order. And those are what I would call the softer um,
Mhm.
expressions of orderliness, just an interest in cleaning up the edges of faith
Right.
so that because evangelicalism, especially in its American form, can be very messy and it can also be very disruptive to institutions. So there are those kinds of pendulum swings, and there are pendulum swings like that, I think, in politics as well. Religion and politics often follow the same kinds of paths and trends in American history. But then you get the pendulum swings that go further than that.
Mhm.
So in the 1830s, you have this sort of vaguely anti-democratic, orderly swing back towards more established forms of religion. But by the 1840s, that's becoming a highly sort of a really important anti-Catholic movement.
Mhm.
So at the same time, you get denominations reaching for more traditional practices that actually look kind of Catholic. They're also saying, okay, we want to have these kinds of liturgies. We want to be associated again with sort of European style of religions. But what we don't want is that we don't want Catholics here. And so there becomes this anti-Catholic reaction politically, and that's tied up with race, it's tied up with ethnicity. And when the big Irish immigration happens in the 1840s, you get kind of a violent
Mhm.
response.
Right.
Um, and that's a more extreme form of the pendulum. And it's almost like the Protestants who embraced more liturgical forms in a counter-reaction to evangelicalism, they said, well, we don't want to go this far.
Hmm.
We don't want to have, we're not Catholics. We just want to have a more orderly church. So I think that what happens is pendulum swings can get you to a place where all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, there's something over here that's happening that we're kind of scared about.
Right.
And in that case, it was immigration of mostly Catholic populations from Europe. And so they said, well, we might look a little bit more traditional, but we are also not these people. We are also not Catholic. And I'll never forget one time when I was very young, as a scholar at least, probably still in my 20s, maybe early 30s. I was in Pittsburgh and I was just visiting some friends, and we were going around to sort of old churches. And there was this one church that we stopped by, and I remember looking and seeing, oh, that's really interesting architecture for the middle part of the 1800s, because the windows were up really high. And we went inside, and I was talking to the guide who was giving tours around the building. And she said, "Oh, well, there's a reason for that." And I said, "What's the reason?" She said, "Well, that's because Protestants used to heave bricks through the windows of Catholic churches when they
Wow.
were at Mass.
Yeah.
And so we built this church with the windows really high so that that couldn't happen while we were in worship services."
Mhm.
And so, that's an indication of the kind of violence that was being directed against part of the population. And that's when the extremism starts building in. And
Mhm.
that whole movement resulted in, until now, one of the most successful backlash movements in American politics, where I can't remember the exact number, but it was dozens and dozens, if not a couple score, of politicians who were elected to Congress on an anti-Catholic, pro-nativist. That's what it was actually called, the
Mhm.
Know Nothing Party, the
Right.
pro-natalist party, all about white people who were born here, and who were Protestants. They elected quite a number of people to Congress
Mhm.
and started passing laws that were specifically directed against what they thought were threatening populations. um, now people think, what's scary about the Irish,
Right.
Right.
But the Irish were the immigrants of the day
Sure.
that threatened the power structures of mostly white
Yeah.
Protestants.
So, what do you say to someone today who just says, "Oh, this is just one of those pendulum swings. We'll go back the other way. Just relax." I mean, would you say that was true, or would you say, not so much? Time is different.
This time is similar.
Mhm.
And I think that's a important sort of point to
Hmm.
give. You can find places in American history where there have been people who were pretty dangerous in the presidency.
Hmm.
Um, I would say that Andrew Jackson was very dangerous if you happen to be a native person.
Me.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
My
you're not
family
gonna.
my family got uprooted. So I'm
Yeah,
Muskogee. So yeah, we got displaced from Georgia all the way to Oklahoma.
yeah. See, that's not a good thing.
No.
And that was a violence against people, and it was terrorism
Mhm.
against the native population, essentially. So we've had people occupy the presidency who have been violent, who have committed acts against both foreign governments and the American people that have been very, very, very bad. But what I don't really think we've had before, I keep scraping through my mind to try to find examples of this, is we haven't had a complete institutional capitulation to those kinds of
Mhm.
people, whether there were dozens and dozens and dozens of them elected to Congress, like with the Know Nothings in the 1840s, or if it was a off balance president who liked exercising more power than he had really any right to exercise against other human beings. There was always somebody kind of standing there institutionally saying, no, that's not really the direction you should go. So you had a Supreme Court, you had all these other mechanisms. The one place where this analysis is a little questionable, and I have I think it's important to always say is when it comes to the enslavement of Black people in the United States, is there was only very rarely some sort of institutional check on what was happening to them.
Right.
And so when you look through the lens, and this is why, of course, the current administration doesn't want anyone to look through the lens of the
Right.
Black
Yeah.
experience. When you look through the lens of the Black experience, you do really see the some of the most brutal acts of American history.
Hmm.
You do see that as well, of course, with Native peoples, but it's been interesting that in some cases, the institutions of government actually stood up more for the Native populations than they did for the enslaved population of Black people.
Yeah.
Um, and that's neither of those records is great. But the one particularly with African Americans, it was just continual.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I mean, it was a continual absolute failure of institutions. Whereas there were always people along the way who were pointing out how the institutions were not fair, not treating Native peoples equally. There were attempts to make the institutions fairer, and usually they were ham-handed and caused more damage than less when it came to Native folks. But nevertheless, there was still a little bit of that present. Um, and then, it just wasn't there for African Americans.
Yeah.
And so the telling of history is really important when we understand it from when white people understand it from the sides of the folks who government has been used against them
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
for so many generations. So it's harder for us to see that the institutions have failed more than what we think they have.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the institutions have also been more robust in defending the Constitution
Right.
than they are now.
Yeah.
And I think the issue in the past was simply the idea of who does the Constitution really apply to, not that the Constitution itself should be fundamentally ignored.
Hmm.
And so now it's not an issue of oh, let's apply the Constitution to this group and not to this group. Now it is literally, let's dismiss this document that we said we believed in
Hmm.
and literally tear it up and flush it in some toilet
Yeah.
someplace in order to accomplish a more authoritarian purpose.
Sure.
And so that to me, I haven't seen that before.
That's what gets a little scary.
Yeah.
Is like,
Absolutely.
but it's so well of let's just disregard this document that we're built on.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's not just about one people group or another, which is bad enough, but it's let's just dismantle the whole thing.
Yeah, and that was always the fight before in American history. And there were always people who were standing somewhere in
Hmm.
the picture saying that the Constitution should apply to women, that the Constitution should apply to Native peoples, the Constitution should apply to African Americans, should apply to Asian Americans. And eventually the law agreed with that.
Hmm.
And it was those people who were on the edges who were saying these things all along, who seem to have won the argument at the beginning of the 21st century. And then to have it in really the last 15 years, the whole picture changed so radically, I think has left many of us with our heads spinning.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that includes historians who are all, everybody I know in the profession, even the people who were the most far-sighted in terms of authoritarianism, everybody's saying this has all happened much faster than they imagined it would. And also the popular, just like ennui,
Hmm.
Mhm.
just we're going to go along to get along kind of
Sure.
thing, or people not even seeing what's going on around them, is those things are shocking to folks who were well attuned to the possibility of this happening.
Okay, so Diana, like we said a moment ago, you and Robbie Jones and Jamar Tisby and Kristen DeMay, you were traveling during the election, warning people
Were.
about what was going on. You were in North Carolina and Arizona and a few other states. Here at Good Faith Media, we were doing the same thing, writing every day, talking about it on this podcast, interviewing people, like I just mentioned, you included. And here we are 10 months into this administration, seeing this happening at warp speed, like you just mentioned. There's a temptation to step back and say, well, we told you so, but we can't do that. And so, what we have been inspired by for the first part of this administration, Trump 2.0, has been the resilience of clergy, of people of faith, and communities standing up against this tyranny, whether the issue is immigration, whether it is women's health rights, abortion care, whether it's LGBTQ rights, trans people who are being attacked. We're seeing it everywhere, but we're starting to see more and more people join that resistance, especially as the economy begins to falter. And then even in rural areas, we're getting word of big populations of farmers and communities coming together to resist what they're encountering. So, again, as a historian, are you starting to see glimmers of hope crack through this darkness of tyranny?
Um, I think right now it's all so complicated and so fuzzy that it's hard to see what's happening right at this moment. Um, in another few months, certainly another couple of years, all of that will become clearer.
Hmm.
And so I am always a little shy of making predictions or trying to point out things that are hopeful, because you don't always know in the longer term how that's going to work.
Hmm.
What I do know, that's been right in front of me and where I feel like I have been leaning in is that, y- when you talk as a historian, you go and you're warning people and you're trying to, make political change, and then you see all this happening. Um, it's very hard right now for individuals to figure out what they can possibly do
Hmm.
because there is so much we cannot do. I do not have a ton of power. I mean, my main power is my vote. We have an election this year in Virginia. I already voted. And so we still have that vote and voice. Those are the two main powers that we have. And that's tied up with, of course, our bodies, so you
Yeah.
put your your bodies
Yeah.
someplace
Yeah.
where it will make a difference. And so I have gone to some protests,
Yeah.
and I will continue to do that. And so those are the powers that we have. Now, for me, in terms of using my voice, I sort of decided that the warning phase was well over for me. I
Hmm.
have done all that work.
Right.
And I like talking about the history of it because I think it's really interesting to people to see how, American history is a little different than what we were taught in school, and that there are these periods of time where violence was more normalized than less. And there are communities who have always felt threatened. And it's really important to remember those communities. I deeply believe that American Christianity is part of the problem. Um,
Yep.
and it's not the Christianity of everybody, but it is a kind of Protestantism and Catholicism that is pervade in churches that have primarily European background white folks. And we have bought into certain kinds of myths and even lies about the Bible, about theology, and about the relationship between religion and politics. So, what I have figured is that if Christianity is part of the problem, now that I know something about.
Yeah, well, and you point this out in the book. It's Christianity of empire, and
Right.
you've been writing about that all of your career. But I also want to say this before I hand it over to Missy, is that I contend I appreciate your humility, but I still resonate with your daughter's words times in your family text that Dianna Butler Bass is out there fighting fascism all the time.
Yeah, my daughter has indeed said that on occasion when I'm not home. Oh, mom's out fighting fascism. She was saying that before it was common for anybody to think those ways. So, I mean, yes, I was certainly seeing authoritarianism come,
Mhm.
and my daughter was smart enough and is smart enough to see that her mom has been trying to do something
Yeah.
about that for a long
It's a
time.
great story.
Well,
Just
I'm
such a
sure
great
the
story.
apple doesn't fall far from the tree in terms
Absolutely
of
it doesn't.
brilliance in your household. But moving on, let's talk about the book, A Beautiful Year. In it, you talk about returning to the deeply enriching practice of following the Christian calendar. In the introduction to the book, you write, "The Christian story I lean upon doesn't float around disembodied. Unlike the Christian American story of decline and apocalypse, it is more of a pilgrimage tale about how we humans might make our way in the world with faith, hope, and love." So, Diana, talk to us about how you find so much peace and hope in following and reflecting on the Christian story as told through the calendar. I love the words and the way you kind of express that sentiment.
Yeah, I don't know that I find peace in it.
Okay, thank you. Now I relate much more to you in this moment.
What I do find in it is strength and courage,
Mm.
which then, those are things I think that contribute to what real peace is supposed to
Mhm.
be. But this relates in such a fun way to what we were just talking about,
Mhm.
because sometimes I'm still, on stage with friends of mine who are doing a lot of work in the authoritarian y- realm. And so people will say, "Hey, well, what books are y'all writing right now?" My friends will be writing books about Christian
Yeah.
nationalism and fascism and authoritarianism and the threat to history and all these things. And then they get to me and it's like, well, I'm writing a book called A Beautiful Year.
I bet
And
you get
what
a lot of
happened?
side eyes, don't you?
Well, people usually break out laughing, um, because they say, "What? What? There is nothing that's beautiful." And then the next response is, "Oh, I need that."
Mhm.
Absolutely.
That's the connection
Mhm.
between the Christian year and this book that I've written, and where we are with all of this horrible news that we've been
Mhm.
talking about in the beginning of this program. And that is, where does it come from? What is being taught in these white churches that creates the environment in which this horrible stew of violence and authoritarianism and hatred can grow? And one of the things that I think is fascinating that folks rarely notice is that we have ideas about time and how we live in time. And when we talk about time as human beings, essentially what we're doing is talking about how our lives are playing out in history.
Mhm.
And so within white Christian churches, there's an idea of time. And the ideas of time that we hold are shaped not primarily by Christianity, but they are shaped primarily by the secular calendar that we live under. And I think this is a huge irony,
Mhm.
because all of these people who are saying they want to have a Christian America back, they never say anything about how we are living with a calendar that was essentially invented 2,000 years ago by the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
And every one of the months of the calendar that we use is named after a Roman emperor, a Roman celebration, a Roman god, or a Roman numeral.
Hmm.
And so every morning when we wake up, and all of our birthdays and all of the things we celebrate, like the 4th of July is on the fourth day of Emperor Julius Caesar.
I That is going to be on my t-shirt next year at the neighborhood barbecue. I love.
Oh.
And then we go to the beach during the month of the Emperor Augustus,
Hmm.
who is, was the one who was on the throne, who had the thing about taxing people that caused Mary and Joseph to go to Bethlehem and have Jesus in a barn. And so you think about this is that we live under a calendar that's shaped by an imperial sense of time, named after emperors and an empire. And it's not just that it's an imperial calendar, but it's also a military calendar. Many of the oldest holidays on the calendar that sort of remain through the centuries are those that celebrate great victories. And that was, of course, the way an empire worked, is that the most important holy days were military days as well. And there are also days generally that celebrate something having to do with the economic system. And the old Roman calendar, that's what it did as well. It celebrated not just the empire as a whole, it wasn't just an expression of its voice and its language and its way of structuring time, but it also celebrated their heroes, their victories, and the way that they had worked an economic view of the world that supported that power. And so if you look at the American calendar, you look at the Western calendar, it's all exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's about imperialism. It celebrates primarily military holidays, and it is also about economic benefit. And so there's been through the centuries, of course, in the Middle Ages, they tried to cobble in a whole bunch of stuff into that calendar about saints and Christian holy days. But by and large, the only things we have left of that are Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
So
Um, and so there's these vague kind of medieval remnants of Christianity in the secular calendar, but really it's very secular and it celebrates those other three things. So if you live in a world where the heroes and the celebrations and the visions of the history that you're living in are all about powerful rulers, the spread of empire, military heroes and victories, and then what day you should buy the cheapest stuff before Christmas.
Yeah.
um
Very true.
or we have Black Friday, and we have all these other now celebrations about Cyber this day and
Mhm.
that day, and Amazon Prime Day, and
mhm,
these are and now we also our political calendar
right.
has become very much cobbled into the consciousness of most Americans, which that wasn't really a thing. I don't know, Mitch, you might remember this a little bit more than Missy growing up. You get to the every fourth year and you think, oh, it's the year of the Olympics. Oh, and we
Oh,
have a presidential
that's
election
right.
too.
Exactly. I remember that growing up as a kid. Absolutely.
Yeah, you just didn't think about it.
Right.
And so now, though, you walk down the street and ask people about the political calendar, and folks can tell you all kinds of things. They can, here in Washington, D.C., honestly, I mean, this might be a little weird, but they can tell you when Congress is out of session. I can actually tell you what day of the week Congress people fly out of Reagan National Airport.
Wow.
Um, they should just call Thursday Escape from DC Day.
National holiday.
So
Every Thursday should be a national
That's
holiday.
right.
And so but think about that.
Right.
Is that our elections, people say, oh, well, the 2-year election
Mhm.
mark is only a little bit off, and
Yeah.
then we can get Congress again. And so we've politicized the calendar on
Mhm.
top of everything else.
Yeah.
And if we can't live with any kind of sanity in a calendar that those are the things that is celebrating,
Mhm.
that is not going to do anything but colonize us.
That's a great word.
so tell us then what is different about the reframing of the calendar in your mind to following a Christian calendar. And it's funny, as you were talking, I started thinking of, does your calendar include, not wearing white shoes after Labor Day? And, switching them after Memorial Day? Because, those are some things that pop into my mind. I'm like, well, would that be included on our Christian calendar? Because by golly, it was included on mine growing up. But yeah, so help us in the reframing of that. What does that look like?
Missy, I just said that makes me laugh so hard because one time I actually did preach a sermon about the Christian calendar in a church in Memphis, Tennessee, and I took a pair of white heels into the pulpit with me, hid them under my robe, and I pulled them out at that's the right part. And all of the Southern ladies in the
Right.
congregation, yeah, they went, "Oh no, it's October and she has a white shoe in her hand."
I'm telling you, it is a thing. It is so deeply ingrained. I had a whole conversation with a friend the other day about wearing white jeans in the winter. Sometimes we can now, but you have to label them they're winter white,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
I mean, it's a very subtle difference, but it's an important distinction.
Your Texas is showing right now.
It's so ingrained. I know, and I grew up in a state when we're still 100 degrees in September, and yet don't you dare pull out those white heels for church. So, anyways, let's get back to the real subject at hand. But what does it look like to reframe our minds around this calendar?
Well, the thing that's so fascinating to me is that the Christian calendar celebrates none of those things.
Right.
It does not celebrate imperialism. As a matter of fact, there's a feast in the Christian calendar that I do write about towards the end of the book because it's at the end of the Christian year called Christ the King. And that feast, the intention of it, although I don't always know it works out this way, I keep trying to remind people to do it the right way, was actually a reversal of kingship. So instead of celebrating Christ as kind of like the emperor of the church, the intention was to celebrate kingship as servanthood and humility. And so, what does it mean to worship a king who is willing to get on his knees and wash the feet of his friends?
Mm-hmm.
So so it's a reversal day. And the calendar does stuff like that. It takes very familiar themes and then puts them in such a different context. Um, the militarism one is one of my favorite ones to talk about. And this is not in the book, but I plan to speak on it a lot this fall. Um, and that is November 11th. In the Western world, November 11th is remembered as Armistice Day, which is the end of World War One. It's often remembered now as a pretty solemn day to recall the dead in what was a terrible war in Europe. And I think that the Europeans do a better job of the commemoration aspect of it than Americans do. But, it was also very early on, not just a solemn thing. It was a big celebration that the Germans got their, tails
Mm-hmm.
whooped. And so it was about a military victory. So it's softened through the years in European cultures. But in the United States, it's hardened. It's become a much more military celebration. And although it does commemorate people who have largely passed away in wars, it's also a way of lifting up all of the great victories of American wars and celebrating veterans as essentially the saints
Mm-hmm.
of the military. And so that's the way it's celebrated across the Western world as a military commemoration and the memory of a military victory in its softer or harder forms. Um, November 11th is also the feast day of St. Martin of Tours. And St. Martin of Tours has this great story is that he was a Roman soldier and he one night had a dream in which he took off Jesus appeared to him in the dream, takes off his cloak and he puts it around a poor man in a street. And he realizes when he wakes up that he's being called by Jesus to be actually a Christian, to live as a Christian. And he tells his father this. His father gets furious at him because his father is a Roman military officer. And he says, well, I'm going to become a catechumenate, which means you're going to become a learner
Mhm.
of the Christian faith, a student of the Christian faith. And why that's a big deal is because you couldn't be that and be a soldier.
Mm.
We actually have no record at all in Christian history of any person before roughly the year 200, any person who was a Christian who was also a Roman soldier. The early church, despite there's this nice story about the centurion in the Bible, but after that, those next 200 years, the church insisted that you could not serve in the army of Caesar and be a Christian at the same time. So if you decided you were going to be a catechumenate, if you decided you wanted to learn the Christian way, you wanted to be baptized, you had to give up your commission. And that's what St. Martin of Tours did. He surrendered his place, very prestigious thing,
Mhm.
in the Roman army in order to simply join the Christian community. And he eventually becomes a monk, and he becomes a priest, and he's he's very known for his acts of charity,
Mhm.
and for giving away. He gave away all of his stuff, just like it says in the Bible.
Mhm.
And eventually his piety was such and so influential that the people of Tours took him away from the monastery and said, "You're going to be our bishop." And so he became renowned for acts of piety, charity, care for the community, feeding the hungry, and for good preaching. And so that is November 11th on the Christian calendar. And there could not be two starker uses
Right.
of a day.
Right.
Yeah.
One who was the good Roman soldier who gave up a life of glory to empire in order to put his cloak around the poor. And the other is the day in which we're sort of required by culture and law to put our cloaks around soldiers.
Oh. So,
That's just fascinating.
ladies and gentlemen, that is why you need to go pick up A Beautiful Year right now after this podcast. So make certain you order it because it is absolutely brilliant. Dianna Butler Bass, thank you so much for joining us this week on Good Faith Weekly. Again, the book is titled A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. Again, you've been one of my heroes. I've been so excited that you were going to be on the show this week, and I thank you so much. But Dianna, before we let you go, we've got one last question for you, and Missy has the honor of asking it.
So, Diana, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
Oh my goodness. Well, my more to tell does have to do with a new book. And that is, I gave a very serious example about a Christian saint, but there's all kinds of things in A Beautiful Year in which I take stories of very regular people, my
Mhm.
parents, my dog, all kinds of just everyday relationships. And I run them up next to the Christian year.
Mhm.
And probably the most meaningful essay in the whole book to me is a memory of my father putting up blue Christmas lights
Yep.
on our house during Advent, right before Christmas, and me using that memory of the blue Christmas lights to reflect on what's become kind of a new celebration in Christian churches, that of a blue Christmas.
Yeah.
And so anybody who's having who will be having a blue Christmas this year, I hope you'll find some of those stories, not only about people like St. Martin who lived a long time ago, and you think to yourself, oh, I could never be like that. But a lot of the stories are more like 6-year-old Diana holding the hand of her father in the snow,
Oh,
wondering what blue lights have to do with Christmas.
It was beautifully written. I mean, it's just a great chapter in this book. So that is a little taste of the book. Again, it's titled A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. Dianna, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an honor.
Well, thank you so much. It's been fun to talk about the book, see what happens is that we start with the heaviness and the
Right,
weight
right.
of authoritarian takeover, and we can get to a place together. And that's actually the purpose of what I've been working on, not just here, but everywhere I go. The more our spirits are lifted, the more courage we can have, and the more courage we can have, the more of the good emotions to defeat the evil that's around us in these days.
I love
And
that.
that is a great word to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this week on Good Faith Weekly. And until next week, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.